Chapter 111 is a chapter of exhale and gathering, the calm after an enormous storm, and it uses that calm to do two things at once, to let these battered characters finally breathe, and to quietly reveal that Kim Dokja is already 3 moves into his next impossible scheme. It's warm, it's funny, and underneath the warmth it's absolutely ruthless. It opens on aftermath and rewards. A new Dakibi, unervingly polite, steps in to handle the calculations for the 5th scenario, doling out healing potions and bonuses to the survivors. The politeness is so out of character for a Dakibi that even Dokja finds it faintly disturbing, a reminder that the machinery of this world is always strange even when it's being generous. Rewards are distributed. Major contributors receive special prizes, and Dokja is offered a new skill, lie detection, a B-grade ability that he accepts with genuine, almost childlike delight. After everything he's endured, there's something lovely about watching him get excited over a useful new tool. He's finally got his hands on it, he thinks, pleased, and the small human joy of it grounds the whole scene. The chapter attends to the threads left dangling. Yu Junghyuk has gone off somewhere with one of the group, collecting skills and items, always preparing, always sharpening himself for what's next. The 6th scenario, we learn, will begin in just a few days, which hangs over the celebration like a quiet clock. And there's a striking, bittersweet beat where a figure tied to the previous round reminds Dokja that their contract period is over, a small acknowledgement that alliances in this world are temporary, transactional, always dissolving even as new ones form. But the heart of the chapter is the celebration, and it's genuinely joyful. Because they did it. Against everything, the group protected Seoul. The narration lands it with real weight, admitting that everything didn't go as planned, but they managed to protect Seoul, and the city won't be in danger for at least a few more scenarios. That's an enormous victory, paid for in blood and grief, and the chapter lets the characters have their moment. They gather, they relax, and the exhaustion melts into something like happiness. And then Han Soo-young comes back. The paranoid novelist who faked her death and vanished reappears, arms full of alcohol she cheerfully admits to helping herself to, ready to celebrate. Her return is a delight, that prickly, sharp-tongued energy sliding right back into the group as if she never left, and it quietly answers the ache from earlier chapters. She wanted to be chased. Instead, she came back on her own, drawn to these people despite herself. The chapter doesn't make a big deal of it, which is exactly why it works. The celebration turns into a drinking party, and the chapter mines it for warmth and comedy in equal measure. The whole group unwinds, sharing drinks, praising each other, reliving the impossible things they just survived. And the affection they show Dokja is genuinely touching. One by one they tell him how amazing he was, how cool he looked standing up to gods and Dakibi, how they felt watching him fight for something everyone else had given up on. You did good, Dokja, they tell him, echoing the very words he gave to a dying child not long ago. After a whole arc of Dokja pouring belief into others, the chapter lets him receive some back, and it's quietly moving to watch this lonely reader surrounded by people who care about him. There's wonderful comedy woven through it, too. The drinking reveals everyone's quirks, who can hold their liquor and who can't, the small human textures of a group finally relaxed enough to be silly. Han Soo-young turns out to be a formidable drinker, and the banter flows as freely as the alcohol. For a few pages, the apocalypse feels far away, and these people get to just be people, laughing together in the ruins of a city they saved. But this is Kim Dokja, and the chapter's final turn reveals that even his celebration is a scheme. Because the drinking isn't just for fun. There's a reason he's making a show of it, a reason he's drawing attention to the alcohol and the revelry. And the chapter snaps it into focus with a single, electric system message and a line that recontextualizes the entire chapter. A constellation, the god of alcohol and ecstasy, wants to speak with him. And Dokja, watching it happen exactly as he intended, thinks the words that end the chapter like a trap springing shut. Olympus has taken the bait. It's a gorgeous reveal, because it retroactively transforms everything. The celebration, the drinking, the whole relaxed atmosphere, all of it was partly theater, a lure cast into the star stream to attract the attention of a very specific pantheon. Dokja is still chasing his promise, still hunting for a way to reach the underworld and retrieve Yuzong's soul, and he understood that the road to Hades runs through Olympus, through a god of wine and revelry who could be drawn out by exactly this kind of display. While everyone else was simply celebrating survival, Dokja was fishing for a god. What makes chapter 111 so effective is how it layers genuine emotion over relentless calculation. The joy is real. The affection is real. Han Soo-young's return, the group's love for Dokja, the relief of having saved Soul, none of it is fake. But underneath all of it, Dokja never stopped working the problem, never stopped scheming toward the promise he made a dying woman. That's the beautiful contradiction at the heart of his character. He can be fully present in a moment of warmth and simultaneously 3 steps ahead in a plan nobody else can see. He celebrates and schemes in the same breath. And it sets the stage for something enormous. Because reaching out to Olympus, baiting a god of the Greek pantheon, is Dokja stepping onto a far larger and more dangerous board than anything he's played on before. The Dakibi and the local constellations are one thing. The gods of Olympus are another tier entirely, ancient and vast and not to be trifled with. And Dokja is deliberately provoking them, casting himself as bait, all for the sake of a promise to bring back a girl the whole universe agreed should stay dead. By the end of chapter 111, the storm has passed and a new one is forming. Soul is safe. The group is whole, healed, celebrating, even Han Soo-young back in the fold. And Kim Dokja, glass in hand, has just successfully lured a god into his web. The celebration was real. The scheme was realer. And as the god of alcohol and ecstasy turns its attention toward this strange, desperate human, you understand that Dokja's second promise is about to take him somewhere no reader has ever gone, into the machinery of Olympus itself, chasing a soul all the way to the doors of the dead. It's worth appreciating the emotional generosity the chapter shows before it springs its trap, because that generosity is what makes Dokja's scheming forgivable. This is a group of people who have been through hell together, who have watched each other die and bleed and break, and the chapter gives them a genuine reprieve, a night of warmth they've more than earned. The affection they pour on Dokja lands so hard precisely because we've watched him spend the entire previous arc pouring himself out for others, saving a doomed girl, arguing with gods, dying and coming back, never once asking for anything in return. So when his friends finally tell him he did well, when Han Soo-young slides back into the group with her bottles and her barbs, when the whole exhausted crew lets itself simply be happy for a moment, it feels like the universe paying back a small fraction of a debt. And that's exactly why the final reveal cuts so cleanly. Dokja let them have their joy, was even part of it, and still never stopped working toward the promise burning quietly in his chest. He didn't fake the warmth. He just never let it stop him. That ability to hold love and calculation in the same hand, to be fully present and fully scheming at once, is the most Kim Dokja thing about him. And it's why you never stop rooting for a man who treats even a god's attention as one more piece to move on a board only he can see. Chapter 112 is Kim Dokja playing chess with a god, and it's a masterclass in how this series turns mythology, cleverness, and sheer nerve into gripping drama. It's the chapter where his plan to reach the underworld snaps fully into view, and where he gambles everything on knowing an old story better than the god who lived it. It opens on the reveal of who took the bait, and it's a big one. The god of alcohol and ecstasy is Dionysus, one of the 12 gods of the Greek pantheon, a genuine Olympian. The chapter takes a moment to establish just how significant that is. This isn't a minor constellation or a local spirit. This is a major god, ancient and powerful, the only one who uses that particular nickname in all of Olympus. Dokja has hooked something enormous, and the danger and opportunity of it crackle through every panel. Dionysus makes his desire simple. He wants Dokja to drink more. The god of wine and revelry is drawn to the celebration, to the alcohol, to this strange human putting on such an entertaining display. And so a drinking contest of sorts unfolds, Dokja matching cups with Han Sooyoung, playing the part, keeping the god engaged. Sooyoung, sharp as ever, warns that one of them has to stay sober, that Dokja shouldn't drink too much. And here the chapter deploys one of Dokja's quietest, cleverest advantages, because his personal skill, the fourth wall, keeps him from getting truly drunk, letting him perform intoxication while staying perfectly clear-headed. He can drink with a god and never lose himself, which is exactly the edge he needs. The relationship between Dokja and Sooyoung gets lovely, wry development here, two guarded, cynical people who communicate through insults and shared drinks, each quietly enjoying the other's company more than they'd ever admit. It's good, one of them notes, to have someone to drink with, because it was getting a little lonely. Small moments like that keep the human heart beating under all the cosmic scheming. But the real substance of the chapter is the mythology, and this is where Dokja's plan reveals its brilliance. Because Dokja isn't just entertaining Dionysus. He's interrogating the god's own origin, betting his entire scheme on a specific version of an ancient myth. He lays out the two competing legends of Dionysus's birth. In the more famous version, Dionysus's mother is Semele, a princess of Thebes, seduced by Zeus and then destroyed when a jealous Hera tricked her into demanding to see Zeus's true form, burning her to death in his divine radiance. It's a tragic, well-known story, and Dionysus half confirms it, musing darkly that this is how his father killed his mother. But there's a second version, and this is the one Dokja needs. In the other legend, Dionysus's mother is Persephone, the wife of Hades, queen of the underworld. And that single mythological detail is the key to everything. Because if Dionysus is truly the son of Persephone, then he's connected to the underworld, connected to Hades, connected to the realm of the dead where Yuzong's soul now wanders. Dokja needs the second story to be the true one, because it means Dionysus is his road to the underworld, his way to reach the god who can give him back the soul he promised to save. It's a stunning piece of plotting, because Dokja is doing what he always does, weaponizing knowledge, but at a scale and with the stakes that are breathtaking. He's using his deep familiarity with mythology, filtered through his reader's understanding of how stories work, to manipulate a literal god into becoming a bridge to the land of the dead. He provokes Dionysus, needles him, plays the insolent human, and the god, intrigued rather than offended, admits he rather likes rude humans. The dance between them is electric, a mortal and an Olympian circling each other, each testing the other, Dokja steering the conversation exactly where he needs it to go. The chapter is honest about the enormity of what he's attempting. Reviving the dead is supposed to be impossible. Reaching the underworld is not a thing. Mortals do. But Dokja insists, with that stubborn certainty that defines him, that it'll be different for him. He explains his reasoning, that if he can communicate with Persephone, wife of Hades, through her son Dionysus, he can find a path to the underworld and to the soul he's trying to retrieve. It's audacious to the point of madness, a plan that treats the gods of Olympus as stepping stones toward keeping a promise he made to a dying girl. And Dionysus, watching this desperate, clever human scheme his way toward the impossible, is delighted. He finds Dokja entertaining precisely because he's so desperate, so reckless, so willing to gamble everything. There's a dark thrill in the god's amusement, the sense of an immortal being genuinely surprised by a mortal for the first time in ages. Dokja has done what he does best, he's made himself into a story too interesting to ignore. The chapter caps it with the payoff Dokja was gambling for, the confirmation that his scheme is working. A new hidden scenario arrives. The god of alcohol and ecstasy is guiding his soul. And Dionysus offers a line that sets the entire next stage of the journey, expressing hope that the father of the rich knight, Hades himself, the lord of the underworld, takes a liking to Dokja. The door to the land of the dead has been cracked open. Dokja's mad plan to reach Hades through a god of wine has succeeded, and now his soul is being guided toward the underworld itself. What makes chapter 112 so thrilling is how completely it embodies the fantasy at the core of this series, the idea that knowledge and nerve can move even gods. Dokja doesn't have the power to force his way into the underworld. What he has is a reader's understanding of an ancient myth and the audacity to bet his life on it. He looked at the two versions of Dionysus's birth and chose to make the useful one true through sheer force of will and clever provocation. That's not fighting. That's storytelling as a weapon, and nobody wields it like Kim Dokja. And underneath the cleverness, the emotional stakes never waver. Every bit of this scheme, the drinking, the mythology, the provocation of a god, all of it is in service of a single promise made to a broken woman as she died. Dokja told Yuzong he'd bring her back, that she wouldn't stay dead, that she should wait for him. And here he is, matching cups with an Olympian, weaving through Greek legend, gambling his soul on reaching the land of the dead, all to keep that word. The second promise drives everything. By the end of chapter 112, the board has expanded to a cosmic scale, and Dokja has just pulled off the opening move of his most audacious plan yet. He baited a god, out-argued a myth, and cracked open the door to the underworld. His soul is being guided toward Hades, the lord of the dead, on a quest to retrieve a girl the universe wanted to stay buried. It's impossible. It's insane. And it's exactly the kind of ending Kim Dokja refuses to accept. The reader who bends fate with knowledge has just talked his way to the threshold of death itself, and you turn the page desperate to follow him through it. It's worth slowing down to appreciate just how strange and brilliant Dokja's weapon is here, because it reframes the entire nature of his power. He is sitting across from an Olympian god, a being of immense and ancient strength, and his tools are a drinking game and a scholarly argument about mythology. He can't overpower Dionysus. He can't outlast him in any contest of divine might. What he can do is know the god's own story better than the god cares to remember it, and use that knowledge to steer the encounter exactly where he needs it. It's the purest expression of what makes this series special. In a world of constellations and catastrophes and cosmic power, the most dangerous thing a person can wield is a story, and Kim Dokja is the best reader alive. And notice how the chapter frames Dionysus's amusement, because it's the key to the whole exchange. The god isn't charmed by Dokja's strength or his flattery. He's charmed by his desperation, by the raw, reckless human hunger of a man willing to gamble his soul on an impossible promise. To an immortal who has seen everything, that kind of desperation is a novelty, a flavor he hasn't tasted in ages. Dionysus likes rude humans, likes desperate humans, likes the ones who burn too bright and reach too far, and Dokja gives him exactly that. It's a reminder that in the star stream, being interesting is its own form of power, and that Dokja's greatest asset has always been his refusal to be predictable. He turned himself into a story an Olympian couldn't look away from, and in doing so, he pried open the door to the land of the dead. That's not a fighter's victory. It's a reader's, and a writer's, and it's why the promise he's chasing suddenly feels, against all reason, like something he might actually keep. Chapter 113 sends Kim Dokja somewhere no living person is supposed to go, and it turns a journey into the land of the dead into a haunting, unexpectedly moving meditation on guilt, consequences, and the people we leave behind us. It's eerie, it's tense, and it forces Dokja to walk among the dead he made. It opens with his consciousness crossing over, his soul freed from his body and entering the underworld as the spirit of a living man. The imagery is gorgeous and strange, rivers of gold and shadow, the sense of a vast realm beyond the world of the living. He arrives at the Acheron, the great river of the underworld that Hades rules over, where the ferryman Charon waits to carry souls deeper into the realm of the dead. Dokja has done the impossible. He's walked, alive, into the afterlife itself, chasing the promise he made to bring back a lost soul. But the underworld immediately notices him. His presence as a living spirit is an intrusion, an anomaly, and the systems and denizens of this realm register it at once. He has to move carefully, because a living man in the land of the dead is exactly the kind of thing that draws dangerous attention. The chapter builds a wonderful atmosphere of dread and wonder, this ordinary reader picking his way through a mythological hellscape, out of place and hunted from the moment he arrives. And then the chapter delivers its emotional gut punch, because the underworld, it turns out, is full of people Dokja knows. Specifically, it's full of the dead. And in a story where Dokja has killed to protect his friends, killed people he judged would become villains, that realization lands with terrible weight. How could he have missed the fact that the people he's killed would be here? The land of the dead is, of course, where the dead end up. And that means Dokja is now walking through a realm populated by the consequences of his own choices, the souls he sent here himself. The first of them he meets is a figure the chapter reveals with real impact, Namwon Kim, a white-haired young man, one of the characters Dokja bookmarked and, it becomes clear, one he killed. Namwon recognizes him, and their reunion is loaded with everything unspoken between a killer and his victim. Did you forget, Namwon asks, the pointed question of someone who died by Dokja's hand and now stands before him in the afterlife? It's an uncomfortable, powerful moment, forcing Dokja, and the reader, to confront the human cost of his pragmatism. But the chapter refuses to make it simple, and that's what makes it extraordinary. Because Namwon isn't vengeful. He's changed. Down here in the underworld, he's had a great deal of time for self-reflection, and he tells Dokja something genuinely startling. He's not angry. In fact, he's grateful. He's grateful that Dokja killed him. The chapter uses Dokja's new lie detection skill to confirm it, the system verifying that Namwon is telling the truth. He really means it. It's a haunting, complicated idea. Namwon, who was heading down a dark path in life, found in death a kind of peace, a chance to atone, a strange gratitude toward the person who ended his violent trajectory. He talks about how the underworld feeds you, gives you a roof, sends you to a kind of school, an oddly mundane afterlife where a lost soul can finally reflect and grow. He was much more of a psychopath than the fearsome Junghyuk in the novel, he admits, and of course Dokja is scared of him, but he's changed now. The chapter lets this land as something almost redemptive, a person who needed to be stopped, and finding in that ending an unexpected mercy. The relationship between them becomes the strange heart of the chapter, a killer and his victim, forced together in the land of the dead, wary and awkward and yet oddly companionable. Namwon has been keeping himself busy, building things, surviving the underworld's routines. And Dokja needs exactly this kind of ally, someone who knows this realm, someone with a reason to help him. Their uneasy alliance is one of those bizarre, wonderful pairings this series loves, two people who should be enemies finding a reason to work together. The chapter also builds the machinery of the underworld itself, the rules and dangers of this realm. There are overseers, judges, inspections, a whole bureaucracy of the dead that polices its citizens. The judges of the underworld are a looming threat, powerful figures who could obliterate an intruding living spirit. And Dokja, marked by his very aliveness, has to navigate this system carefully, hiding his nature, avoiding the attention of forces that could end his quest, and his existence, in an instant. Woven through it all is the reason he came, the search for Yuzong's soul. Dokja questions Namwon, asks whether he's seen anyone new arrive, anyone who might be the girl he's looking for. He describes her, a young woman, white hair, a ponytail, quite pretty. And here the chapter deepens the mystery, because Namwon hasn't seen her, which raises unsettling questions. If Yuzong's soul came from a different world, it may not have crossed the Acheron yet, may not have arrived where Dokja expected. The search is more complicated than he hoped, and the clock is ticking. What makes chapter 113 so effective is how it fuses the mythological with the deeply personal. On one level, it's a fantastical journey through the Greek underworld, full of rivers and ferrymen and looming judges. On another, it's a profound reckoning with consequences, forcing Dokja to walk among the dead he created, to look his victims in the eye, to confront the cost of the ruthless choices that keep his friends alive. The genius is that it does both at once, and that the confrontation, when it comes, offers not condemnation but something stranger and more moving, gratitude, atonement, the possibility that even the people he killed found something like peace. And it deepens Kim Dokja as a character in the best way. He's a man who kills when he judges it necessary, who carries that pragmatism as a burden he refuses to let break him. This chapter makes him, and us, sit with what that means, and it complicates the simple morality of it. Namwon's gratitude doesn't absolve Dokja, but it doesn't damn him either. It just makes the whole thing human, messy, real, a killer and his victim finding, in the land of the dead, an uneasy understanding. By the end of chapter 113, Dokja is deep in the underworld, allied with a man he killed, hunted by the judges, searching for a soul that hasn't appeared where he expected. The quest to keep his promise has taken him into the heart of death itself, and every step deeper reveals both new dangers and new echoes of his own past choices. He came to retrieve one soul. He's finding, instead, a whole realm full of the consequences of his life. And as the chapter closes on that eerie, haunted note, you understand that this journey isn't just about bringing Yuzun back. It's about Kim Dokja walking, alive, through everything his choices have cost, and refusing, as always, to turn back. It's worth dwelling on how radically this chapter reframes the moral weight Dokja carries, because it's doing something few stories dare. Most series that let a hero kill treat the deaths as consequences to be felt in the moment and then left behind, mile markers on the road to power. Omniscient Reader's viewpoint refuses that convenience. It builds an entire realm where the dead persist, where the people Dokja killed have gone on existing, thinking, changing, and then it walks him straight through the middle of it. Every soul down here is a choice he made, given a face and a voice and a continued life. That's an almost unbearable idea, and the chapter is brave enough to sit in it rather than flinch away. And the genius of using Namwon Kim as the first encounter is that Namwon complicates the guilt instead of simply amplifying it. If Namwon had raged at Dokja, demanded vengeance, the scene would have been a straightforward reckoning, guilt confirmed and punished. Instead Namwon is grateful, at peace, even improved by his death, and that's so much harder to process. It denies Dokja the clean absolution of being forgiven and the clean condemnation of being hated, leaving him instead with something murkier and more true, the knowledge that his choices had consequences he can never fully weigh, that the same act can be both a killing and a mercy depending on where you stand. Lie detection confirming Namwon's sincerity only sharpens the discomfort, because it strips away any comforting doubt. Namwon really is grateful. Dokja really did end a life. Both things are true at once, and the chapter makes you hold them together without resolving them, which is exactly the kind of moral honesty that makes this series more than an action story. Chapter 114 deepens Kim Dokja's descent into the underworld into a tense, clever heist through the land of the dead, and it introduces a mysterious figure who might just be the key to everything. It's a chapter about hiding in plain sight, building impossible tools, and a bargain offered from the shadows. It opens with Dokja and Namwon Kim navigating the grim routines of the underworld, a place that treats its dead like laborers, complete with inspections and overseers and the constant threat of discovery. Namwon has been surviving here by keeping busy, and the chapter reveals what he's been building: miniature robots, Titan soldiers, constructed in secret. He does it partly out of boredom, he admits, but the project has a real purpose, because a completed Titan soldier is something powerful enough to matter even in a realm like this. It's a wonderfully strange image, a dead psychopath tinkering with robots in hell, and it's exactly the kind of resource Dokja needs. The immediate danger is the inspection. The overseers of the underworld conduct random searches, hunting for exactly the kind of anomaly Dokja represents, a living spirit hiding among the dead. The chapter builds real tension around it, the sense of a net closing, of authorities pulling their usual heavy-handed sweeps. Namwon grumbles that they're always doing this, but the threat is genuine, because if the inspectors find a living intruder, Dokja's quest ends and his existence with it. So they improvise a hiding place, and it's darkly funny. Dokja conceals himself inside the Titan soldier construct, the robotic organism Namwon has been building. There's grim comedy in the details, the thing being nearly a living organism, the danger of being digested if he climbs inside, the sheer absurdity of a man hiding inside a robot in the underworld to avoid a bureaucratic inspection. But it works, and it demonstrates the resourcefulness that defines Dokja, using whatever's at hand, turning a dead man's hobby project into a lifeline. The chapter fleshes out the geography and politics of the underworld with rich detail. There's talk of the Titan soldier's real potential, that a completed one could be strong enough to defeat Cerberus, the guardian of the underworld, and head straight for Hades' palace. That's the prize dangling in front of Dokja, a path to Hades himself, the Lord of the Dead, the one who could grant what Dokja came for. Namwon even dreams of becoming the king of the underworld himself, Pluto the Titan soldier, an ambition that gives him his own stake in completing the machine. And underneath the scheming, the chapter keeps developing the strange, affecting bond between Dokja and Namwon. The dead man who's grateful to his killer, the killer who now depends on his victim, the two of them working together toward escape and ascension. It's an odd, human relationship, built on the strangest possible foundation, and the chapter mines it for both tension and unexpected warmth. Namwon has found purpose down here, and helping Dokja, ironically, gives him even more of it. Then the chapter introduces its pivotal mystery, and the whole thing tilts towards something bigger. Because a figure appears, veiled and powerful, and she speaks the words Dokja has been chasing this entire journey. "I'm the person you're looking for." A woman who seems to know exactly why he's here, who positions herself as the answer to his quest. She grabs him, and the encounter crackles with danger and possibility. Given everything Dokja has been chasing, a path to Persephone, wife of Hades, the mysterious veiled woman carries the weight of that mythological connection, the sense that she might be the bridge to the underworld's true power. She warns him, ominously, that he'll lose in the Gigantomachia, referencing the great war of gods and giants, hinting at conflicts and forces far larger than Dokja has yet reckoned with. And she offers a bargain wrapped in a threat. If he's going to act against her, he should think again. She has knowledge he needs, a way to complete that Titan soldier, the very machine that could carry him to Hades' palace. She tells him to go and tell the father of the rich knight, Hades himself, that she knows the way. It's a classic mythological bargain, cryptic and dangerous, a powerful figure offering exactly what the hero needs in exchange for something not yet named. The encounter turns physical and eerie, cold seeping through Dokja's very bones, ice and shadow, the sense of a power far beyond a normal spirit gripping him. The chapter makes you feel the danger of dealing with the denizens of this realm, beings who operate by rules and stakes that a living man can barely comprehend. Dokja is out of his depth in a way he rarely is, navigating a world where his usual advantages, his knowledge of the novel, his cleverness, are being tested against forces older and stranger than anything he's faced. And the chapter formalizes his predicament with a hidden scenario, laying out the rules of his impossible situation. A stroll through the underworld, difficulty A+, with a clear condition that captures the whole danger of his quest, find a way back to the realm of the living and avoid being caught by the judges. There's a time limit of 12 hours, a coin reward, and a chilling penalty for failure, that Dokja will be forced to become a citizen of the underworld. In other words, if he fails, he doesn't just lose. He dies, trapped forever among the dead he came to visit. What makes chapter 114 so gripping is how it raises the stakes on every front at once. The clock is now ticking, 12 hours to escape or be trapped forever. The judges are hunting. And the path forward runs through a completed Titan soldier and a mysterious, powerful woman offering a dangerous bargain. Dokja came to find one soul, and instead he's found himself in an elaborate, deadly puzzle, hiding inside robots, allying with the dead, negotiating with shadowy figures, all against a countdown that ends in eternal imprisonment. And through it all, the chapter never loses sight of what drives him. Every risk, every scheme, every dangerous bargain is in service of the promise that brought him here, to find Yuzong's soul and bring her back. The Titan soldier isn't just an escape route, it's a path to Hades, to the power that could grant his impossible request. The mysterious woman isn't just a threat, she's potentially the connection to Persephone he's been seeking. Every piece on the board, however dangerous, is a step toward keeping his word to a dead girl. By the end of chapter 114, Dokja is committed to his most dangerous gambit yet, racing a 12-hour clock through the land of the dead, hiding from judges, building a robot that could carry him to the Lord of the Underworld, and entangled with a mysterious figure who holds the key to completing it. The stakes have never been higher, failure means becoming a permanent citizen of Hell, and the reward, if he can pull it off, is a face-to-face audience with Hades himself. The reader who refuses to accept endings has walked into death's own bureaucracy, and now he has 12 hours to scheme his way to its king, or be lost among the dead forever. And knowing Kim Dokja, you wouldn't bet against him, even here. There's a wonderful thematic resonance in the fact that Dokja's escape route runs through a machine built by a dead man out of boredom and longing. The Titan soldier is, in a sense, Namwon's attempt to build his way out of hell, to construct enough power to defeat Cerberus and storm Hades' palace and become something more than another citizen of the dead. It's a monument to the same refusal that defines Dokja himself, the refusal to accept the ending you've been handed. Down here, where everyone is supposed to be finished, a dead psychopath keeps building, keeps scheming, keeps reaching for a way up and out. And that stubbornness is precisely what makes him useful to Dokja and, in a strange way, what makes them kindred. The chapter quietly suggests that the will to keep fighting an unwinnable situation isn't unique to heroes, that even the damned dream of escape, and that sometimes the line between a villain and an ally is just a matter of pointing that stubbornness in the same direction. And hovering over all of it is the 12-hour clock and its terrible penalty, the threat of becoming a permanent citizen of the underworld, which gives every scheme and every bargain a desperate edge. Dokja isn't just visiting the land of the dead. He's gambling that a reader who refuses endings can outrun the one ending nobody escapes, and he has half a day to prove it. Chapter 115 is a negotiation with a goddess over the nature of death itself, and it's one of the most philosophically rich chapters in this entire stretch of the story. It's Kim Dokja sitting across from the queen of the underworld, refusing her temptations, and arguing that a soul is worth saving even if she insists it doesn't exist. It's tense, cerebral, and quietly devastating. The chapter reveals the veiled figure in full. She is Persephone, the queen of the darkest spring, the wife of Hades, the queen of the underworld herself. Dokja has reached, through Dionysus and his mad mythological gambit, the very being he needed to find. And now he has to bargain with her for the impossible, the return of a lost soul. She receives him with cold, amused elegance, a goddess entertaining a desperate human, and the whole chapter becomes a duel of wills and words between them. Dokja states his purpose plainly. He wants to retrieve someone's soul. And Persephone's response cuts to the heart of everything, because she denies the very premise of his quest. Souls, she tells him, don't exist in this world. There is no such thing as a soul. It's an illusion, she explains, created by humans who so desperately want to believe in their own continued existence that they invented the idea. To her, the thing Dokja is chasing is a comforting lie, a fiction people tell themselves to soften the finality of death. And she pushes the argument further, into genuinely bleak territory. Death, she says, is like an ending to a story. Just as a slaughtered cow cannot be revived, dead people cannot come back to life, because their story has already ended. The soul Dokja seeks is, in her cold framing, just a miserable pile of stories, memories left behind, echoes with no substance. It's a brutal, materialist vision of death, and she delivers it with the weary certainty of a being who has watched countless souls arrive in her realm and never leave. But here the chapter reveals something profound about Dokja's worldview, because he doesn't accept her framing, and the reason why is beautiful. When she says the dead are just stories, Dokja, the reader, the man whose entire existence revolves around the power of stories, hears something very different than she intends. To Persephone, calling a soul a pile of stories is a dismissal. To Dokja, it's almost a definition of value. Because he knows better than anyone that stories matter, that they have weight and power, that a story is precisely the kind of thing worth fighting for. She thinks she's telling him the soul is worthless. She's actually telling him it's exactly the thing he specializes in saving. Then the chapter introduces its central temptation, and it's a classic mythological trap dressed in mouth-watering detail. Persephone offers Dokja food, the food of the underworld. And this is the oldest, most dangerous rule of the realm of the dead, the same trap that bound Persephone herself in the myth, that whoever eats the food of the underworld can never return to the world of the living. She lays out a feast, steak, pasta, soup, and she makes the offer almost irresistible by attaching impossible rewards to each dish. Eat this steak, she tempts, and you'll instantly become a sword master. This pasta will make you an archmage who can reign over continents. The soup will make you an SSS-grade hunter. Instant, godlike power, offered on a plate. It's a masterful temptation, because it's everything a person in this brutal apocalypse could want, strength beyond imagining, handed over for free, no years of training required. Any ordinary incarnation would leap at it. But Dokja understands the catch, that accepting any of it means becoming a permanent citizen of the underworld, trapped forever, his quest failed, his promise broken. And so, with remarkable discipline, he refuses. No, he tells her, again and again, declining feast after feast, resisting a temptation designed to be irresistible. His refusal is a quiet act of heroism, because it demonstrates the thing that makes Dokja different. His ability to see past immediate gain to the long game, to reject even godlike power because it would cost him the promise he came to keep. Persephone, watching him decline riches most humans would kill for, becomes genuinely intrigued. She's used to souls that hunger, that grasp, that break at the first offer. Dokja doesn't break. He just keeps refusing, politely, firmly, his eyes on the only thing he actually wants. The negotiation deepens into dangerous territory. Persephone probes him, tests him, tries to bind him with the kind of unbreakable oath the Greek gods themselves fear, a vow sworn on the river Styx, a promise even Zeus cannot break. She's treating this bargain with the seriousness of divine law, and Dokja has to navigate it carefully, matching a goddess in a game of cosmic contracts. The chapter crackles with the tension of a mortal negotiating as an equal with a being who could unmake him. And through it all, Persephone finds him more and more fascinating. There's a dark delight in how she engages with him, the sense that she hasn't been this entertained in ages. She calls it fun, marvels that he really is like the children of Olympus, reckless and clever and unbowed. Dokja has done the thing he always does, made himself into a story too compelling for even a goddess to dismiss. And that fascination is his leverage, because a bored goddess might crush him, but an entertained one might just deal with him. The chapter builds toward a bargain. Persephone has something Dokja needs, knowledge, power, a path to what he seeks, possibly the means to complete the Titan soldiers that could carry him deeper into the underworld. And she wants something in return. There's one thing she wants, she tells him, hinting at a price not yet named, a condition attached to her help. The negotiation isn't over. It's just entering its most dangerous phase, where the goddess names what this will actually cost him. What makes chapter 115 so gripping is how it turns a conversation into high-stakes drama. There are no fights here, no monsters, just two beings across a table, one mortal and one divine, dueling over the nature of death and the value of a soul. And Dokja holds his own not through power but through conviction, through discipline, through his unshakable belief that a story, even a dead one, is worth saving. He refuses godlike power. He argues theology with the Queen of the Dead. He turns her dismissal of souls into a reason to keep fighting for one. By the end of chapter 115, Dokja stands at the threshold of a bargain with the Queen of the Underworld, having resisted every temptation she laid before him and earned her fascinated attention. The path to keeping his promise runs through whatever price Persephone is about to name. She says the soul he seeks is just a pile of stories. And Kim Dokja, the greatest reader alive, has never in his life been more certain that a pile of stories is exactly the kind of thing he'd crossed the land of the dead to save. Chapter 116 is where the negotiation with the Queen of the Underworld turns intimate and devastating, because Persephone stops testing Dokja's willpower and starts probing his heart. It's a chapter about grief, guilt, and the faces of the people we couldn't save, and it lands some of the quietest, most painful blows in the entire arc. It opens with the bargaining still underway, Persephone continuing to circle Dokja, fascinated by this human who refuses her every temptation. She invites him to sit, addresses him by name, and asks if she might ask him a question. The whole dynamic has shifted from a goddess dismissing a supplicant to something more like two players sizing each other up, and Dokja, ever careful, tells her to go on. He knows he's playing a dangerous game with a being far beyond him, and every exchange matters. The chapter deepens the mystery of Persephone herself. Dokja asks whether the form she wears is her true one, and she answers with unsettling grandeur. Of course not. This is merely her symbolic form. A mere human like Dokja could never withstand her true form, could never even perceive it without being destroyed. It's a chilling reminder of the gulf between them, that the elegant woman across the table is only a mask worn for his benefit, a shape small enough for a mortal mind to survive looking at. She is vast and terrible underneath, and she's letting him forget that only as a courtesy. Then the chapter delivers its gut punch, the moment that transforms the whole negotiation into something achingly personal. Because Persephone, reading Dokja, sensing something in him, changes her form. She shifts, and when she settles into a new shape, it stops Dokja cold. She has taken the form of an old woman. And not just any old woman. She has assumed the form of the old lady Dokja couldn't save in the very first scenario, one of the earliest deaths of his journey, a person he failed to protect at the very beginning of the apocalypse. It's a devastating move, and the chapter lets the weight of it land fully. Persephone, Queen of the Dead, has reached into Dokja's memories and pulled out one of his oldest wounds, wearing the face of his guilt. She's showing him that she can see the griefs he carries, the people he lost, the ones he couldn't save. It's a display of terrifying power, the ability to read a person's deepest regrets, but it's also something more pointed. She's testing him, probing to see how he'll react to being confronted with his own failure made flesh. The moment is loaded with everything Dokja carries. That old woman represents the beginning of his journey, back when he was still learning what this world would cost, before he became the hardened reader who kills when he judges it necessary. She's a symbol of all the people the apocalypse took while he was still finding his footing, the deaths that shaped his resolve to do better, to save more, to never again stand by helplessly. And now the Queen of the Underworld wears her face, watching to see whether Dokja will flinch, break, or beg. Persephone teases him about it, asking with cool amusement whether perhaps he isn't into older women, wondering aloud why he seems uncomfortable. But Dokja's discomfort isn't what she pretends to think. It's grief. It's guilt. It's the sight of a face he thought he'd buried, worn by a goddess as a psychological weapon. That's not the problem, he tells her, and the restraint in his response speaks volumes. He won't give her the reaction she's fishing for, won't let her use his old wound to unbalance him, even as it clearly cuts deep. The chapter uses this to reveal something profound about how the underworld, and Persephone, operate. She deals in memory, in grief, in the specific weight of the dead each person carries. Her power isn't just physical, it's emotional, the ability to reach into a soul and find the faces that haunt it. And by wearing the old woman's form, she's demonstrating exactly why she's such a dangerous negotiating partner, because she can see the levers inside a person's heart and knows precisely how to pull them. But Dokja endures it. That's the quiet heroism of the chapter. Confronted with the face of his oldest failure, offered every temptation, probed at his most vulnerable point, he holds steady. He acknowledges the pain without being ruled by it. He keeps his eyes on the goal, the promise that brought him here, the soul he came to retrieve. Persephone offers to change into a different form if she's making him uncomfortable, a small mercy laced with mockery, and the negotiation grinds forward, Dokja refusing to be broken by the ghosts she conjures. The chapter is rich with the tension of the deal still hanging in the balance. Persephone has knowledge Dokja needs, a way forward, possibly the key to completing the Titan soldiers or reaching Hades himself. And her price remains the central question, the thing she wants in exchange, the condition that will determine whether Dokja can keep his promise or lose everything. Every exchange between them is a move in a larger game, the goddess testing his resolve and his heart, Dokja giving away nothing he doesn't have to. What makes chapter 116 so powerful is how it weaponizes memory and grief in service of drama. The negotiation could have been a dry exchange of terms. Instead, by having Persephone wear the face of Dokja's oldest failure, the chapter makes it deeply personal, forcing Dokja, and the reader, to sit with the accumulated weight of everyone he's lost. It reminds us that behind the clever, scheming reader is a man haunted by the people he couldn't save, and that his entire crusade, including this mad journey into the underworld, is driven by a refusal to keep failing them. And it deepens the thematic core of the whole arc. Dokja came here to save one soul, Yuzung's, the girl he promised to bring back. But the chapter surfaces all the other souls he couldn't save, the old woman and everyone like her, and in doing so it clarifies what this quest really means. It's not just about one girl. It's about a man who has decided that death doesn't have to be the end, that the people the world discards can still be fought for, that even in the realm of the dead, ruled by a goddess who insists souls are just illusions, he will keep trying to save the ones he loves. By the end of chapter 116, Dokja stands in the heart of the underworld, negotiating with a goddess who wears the face of his deepest guilt, holding steady against grief and temptation alike. The old woman he couldn't save watches him with Persephone's knowing eyes, a reminder of every failure that drives him. And still he doesn't break. Still he keeps bargaining, keeps reaching for the promise that brought him to the land of the dead. It's a chapter about the faces that haunt us, and about the stubborn, aching refusal to let death have the final word. Persephone wears his grief like a mask. And Dokja, staring into the face of everyone he's lost, simply keeps going, because that's the only way he's ever known how to carry them. It's worth dwelling on the sheer psychological cruelty of Persephone's chosen tactic, because it reveals how negotiation works at the level of gods. She doesn't threaten Dokja with pain or death, which he's already proven he can withstand. She reaches instead for the one weapon that bypasses all his defenses, his grief. By wearing the face of the old woman he failed to save in the very first scenario, she attacks the part of him that no skill can armor, the part that remembers every person he couldn't protect. It's a masterstroke of intimidation precisely because it looks so gentle, an old woman across a dinner table, and yet it cuts deeper than any blade. And what it reveals about Persephone is that she has been reading him the entire time, sifting through the memories he carries, searching for the pressure point that will finally make this maddening, unbreakable human flinch. She found it. The question is whether finding it will be enough. And Dokja's response to that pressure is the quiet triumph of the chapter. He doesn't pretend the wound isn't there. He doesn't deny the grief or perform indifference. When she teases him about his discomfort, he simply tells her that's not the problem, refusing to let her mislabel his pain as something small and manageable. He acknowledges the hurt while denying her the collapse she's fishing for, and that distinction is everything. It's the difference between a man ruled by his grief and a man who carries it. Dokja carries it. He has always carried it. Every person he couldn't save lives somewhere inside him, and rather than letting that weight crush him or harden him into cruelty, he has turned it into fuel, into the exact stubbornness that drove him to walk into the land of the dead in the first place. Persephone wears his failures like a costume, hoping to unmake him, and instead she's looking at the precise reason he will never stop, the accumulated grief that has become his reason to keep saving people. There's a deeper resonance to the old woman's face specifically, because she belongs to the very beginning of Dokja's journey, before he became the hardened reader who kills when he must. She's a symbol of his innocence and his first failure at once, the moment he learned what this world would take from him. By conjuring her, Persephone isn't just poking a random wound. She's reaching all the way back to the origin of who Dokja became, forcing him to stand at the start of his own story and look at the cost that was there from the first page. And the fact that he can look at it, hold it, and keep bargaining is the whole measure of the man. He has integrated his failures rather than fled them. He knows what lies behind him, which, as the underworld itself keeps insisting, is the only way to know what lies ahead. That's what makes this negotiation more than a clever exchange of terms. It's a test of the soul, administered by a goddess who deals in souls for a living, and Dokja passes it not by being invulnerable but by being honest, by refusing to let his grief become either a weakness she can exploit or a wall that turns him cold. He feels everything and bends to none of it. And Persephone, watching this human hold steady against the weight of every death he carries, seems to understand that she's dealing with something genuinely rare, a person who has looked at the worst of himself and chosen, again and again, to keep reaching for the people he's lost. Chapter 117 is Kim Dokja closing a deal with a goddess, and it's a thrilling display of bluffing, mythology, and nerve, the chapter where his impossible bargain finally takes concrete shape as a quest. It's clever, tense, and it turns an ancient labor into the engine of everything that comes next. It picks up mid-negotiation, with Dokja navigating the treacherous waters of a bargain with Persephone, queen of the underworld. And the chapter reveals a fascinating limitation he's working around, that his knowledge of the novel, the source of all his power, is actually filtered, incomplete. There's information he doesn't have, gaps in what he's read, and Persephone knows it. So Dokja can't simply rely on knowing the future. He has to improvise, to bluff, to bargain as an equal with a being who could crush him. The whole encounter becomes a high-wire act, a mortal talking his way through a divine contract with cards he doesn't fully hold. His offer to the goddess is pure Dokja, and it's audacious. He promises Persephone the most entertaining story in the world. He can't overpower her, can't outbid a goddess in wealth or strength, so he offers the one currency that matters to a being who has seen everything, novelty, drama, a tale worth watching. He pledges to show her something she's never seen, to be a story worth her investment. It's the same move he's used on constellations and gods throughout his journey, turning himself into content too compelling to ignore, and here he aims it at the queen of the dead herself. Persephone, intrigued, responds by framing their arrangement in the language of ancient myth. She'll give him a labor, echoing the 12 labors of Hercules, the legendary trials the hero performed. It's a beautiful mythological touch, casting Dokja as a modern Hercules, a mortal tasked by a god with an impossible feat, and she names his labor. He must bring her the severed head of a serpent. A specific serpent, one with many heads, though she's careful to clarify it's not the Hydra everyone would assume. The serpent he must kill is elsewhere, and he'll find it at his destination, in the place where his path is leading. The chapter has a lot of fun with the mythological framing. Persephone teases the parallels, noting that people will say he's imitating Hercules if he pulls this off. She positions the whole arrangement as something between a trial and, in her cool and unsettling way, a courtship, a strange dance of favor and obligation between the goddess and this fascinating human who wandered into her realm. There's an eerie flirtation to it, the queen of the dead entertained by a mortal, extending him a chance to prove himself worthy of her help. And the deal is sealed with the machinery of the system, a new hidden scenario activated. The labor becomes concrete, a quest with rules and stakes, tying Dokja's mythological bargain to the game-like structure of his world. The serpent he must hunt is located, crucially, in the area where the sixth main scenario will be held, the very stage he's about to enter with his companions. It's an elegant piece of plotting, folding his underworld quest directly into the main story to come, so that the promise he made in the land of the dead will play out on the battlefield of the living. Dokja accepts. "I'll do it," he says, committing to the labor, to the hunt, to whatever it takes to earn Persephone's help and keep his promise. It's a simple declaration, but it carries the weight of everything, because saying yes to a goddess's labor means binding himself to a task he doesn't fully understand, against a monster he's never seen, all for the faint hope of retrieving a soul. The chapter also deepens the mystery and majesty of the underworld's rulers. There are glimpses of the relationship between Persephone and Hades himself, the father of the rich knight, the lord of the dead who looms over the entire realm. Persephone's actions raise questions even from Hades, the sense of a divine marriage with its own tensions and games, and Dokja finds himself a small piece moving between two enormous powers. It's a reminder of just how far out of his depth he is, negotiating in the shadow of gods whose relationships and motives he can barely perceive. What makes chapter 117 so satisfying is how it transforms an abstract quest into a concrete mission. For chapters, Dokja's goal has been vague and enormous: reach the underworld, find a way to bring back a soul. Now it has shape. Kill the serpent. Bring back its head. Earn the goddess's favor. It's the moment a sprawling, philosophical journey crystallizes into a hunt with clear stakes, and that clarity gives the whole arc forward momentum, pointing directly toward the sixth scenario and the monster waiting there. And it showcases everything that makes Dokja such a compelling protagonist. He can't beat Persephone with power. His knowledge is filtered, incomplete, unreliable. So he does what he always does: he bluffs, he charms, he offers a story, he turns his weaknesses into a negotiating position and walks away with a deal. He treats a goddess the way he treats every impossible situation, as a puzzle to be talked through rather than a wall to be smashed. And it works, because even a queen of the dead can't resist a genuinely interesting human. The chapter is rich with the tension of a bargain whose full cost isn't yet clear. Dokja has agreed to a labor, but the terms of a deal with a goddess are never simple, and the courtship framing hints at obligations and dangers still hidden. He's earned a path forward, but paths in the underworld have prices, and the reader senses that Persephone's favor will come with strings Dokja can't yet see. Still, he takes the deal, because the alternative is failing the promise that brought him here. By the end of chapter 117, Dokja has his labor. A serpent to hunt, a head to claim, a goddess's favor to earn, all in the arena of the sixth scenario he's about to face. His impossible quest to retrieve a lost soul has become a concrete mission, folded into the story to come, and he's committed to it fully. The reader who bends fate with knowledge has just accepted a Herculean trial from the Queen of the Dead, betting that a story and a severed head will be enough to bring a girl back from beyond. It's mythology and cleverness and desperate hope all braided together, and it points the whole story toward the hunt to come. Dokja said yes to a goddess's labor. Now he has to survive it. It's worth slowing down to appreciate the sheer nerve of what Dokja pulls off in this negotiation, because it inverts the usual power dynamic in a way that's almost absurd. He is a mortal soul, trespassing in the land of the dead, standing before the queen of the underworld with an incomplete knowledge of his own reality and no divine power to speak of. By every measure, he holds nothing. And yet he negotiates as though he were the one with leverage, because he understands something Persephone can't ignore. A being as ancient and powerful as she is has one enemy that never dies, and that enemy is boredom. Eternity is long. The parade of souls arriving in her realm is endless and monotonous, each of them terrified, grasping, predictable. And then a human walks in who refuses her food, argues theology, bluffs about stories he can't fully read, and treats a goddess like a fellow player at a card table. To Persephone, that novelty is worth more than any treasure, and Dokja knows it. His entire pitch, the most entertaining story in the world, is really a promise to relieve a goddess of her eternal tedium, and that's a currency even the queen of the dead will trade for. And notice how the labor she assigns reframes his whole quest into the language of myth, because that reframing is doing real thematic work. By casting Dokja as a modern Hercules, tasked with slaying a many-headed serpent, the chapter deliberately places him in the lineage of the great mortal heroes who bargained with gods and performed impossible feats. But there's a crucial difference the story wants you to feel. Hercules performed his labors as penance, driven by guilt and the commands of others, a hero purifying himself. Dokja performs his labor for love, freely chosen, driven by a promise he made to a dying girl that no one asked him to keep. The mythological framing elevates his quest to legendary scale, but the motive beneath it is smaller, warmer, and far more human than any Greek hero's. He isn't cleansing his sins or obeying a king. He's keeping his word to someone the universe forgot. That contrast, the epic form wrapped around an intimate promise, is exactly what makes his version of the hero's journey feel fresh even as it borrows the oldest story there is. There's also a quiet brilliance in how the chapter handles the limits of Dokja's knowledge, because it deepens him as a character in a way sheer omniscience never could. For so much of the series, Dokja's power has been that he read the novel, that he knows what's coming. This chapter takes that away, revealing that his information is filtered, that there are things even he doesn't know, and in doing so it forces him to rely on something more fundamental than knowledge, his instincts, his nerve, his ability to read a person, or a goddess, in real time. A lesser protagonist stripped of his advantage would flounder. Dokja adapts instantly, bluffing his way forward, and that adaptability tells you the knowledge was never the source of his strength. It was always the man wielding it. Take away the script, and Dokja still finds a way, because his true gift is not that he knows the story, but that he understands, better than anyone, how stories work, and how to write a new one when the old one runs out. And underneath all the mythology and negotiation, the chapter never lets you forget the stakes are a single soul. Every clever line, every bluff, every mythological flourish is in service of a girl who died believing she was worthless, whom Dokja promised he would bring back. That's the anchor that keeps this chapter from floating away into abstraction. A goddess offers a labor, a serpent must be slain, an ancient bargain is struck, and all of it, every grand and cosmic piece of it, is Kim Dokja trying to keep a promise he made to a child in her final moments. The scale is enormous. The reason is achingly small and human. And that, more than any severed serpent's head, is what he's really carrying out of the underworld. Chapter 118 is where Kim Dokja finally finds what he crossed the land of the dead to find, and it turns the myth of Orpheus into one of the most quietly moving sequences in the whole arc. It's a chapter about looking back, about the stories that make us who we are, and about a soul reaching out of the dark to be saved. It opens with Dokja making his way back toward the world of the living, guided by Persephone's cryptic instructions. And the guidance is drawn straight from Greek myth, from the legend of Orpheus, who descended into the underworld to retrieve his lost love and was told he must not look back on the way out. Follow the path, Dokja is told, and keep looking forward. It's a rule loaded with mythological danger, the same rule that doomed Orpheus when he couldn't resist glancing behind him. But the chapter does something beautiful with the legend, twisting it into a meditation on memory and identity. Because as Dokja walks the dark labyrinth between worlds, glowing words appear, a message that reframes the entire myth. You are afraid of what may be behind you, the words say. That poor child felt the same, but never forgot. You must know what lies behind in order to know what lies ahead. It's a profound inversion of the Orpheus rule. Where the myth punishes looking back, this message insists that looking back is necessary, that you cannot face forward without acknowledging what's behind you, that a person is shaped by their past and can only move ahead by carrying it. Dokja takes this to heart, and it becomes the philosophical heart of the chapter. There has to be a back for him to be able to face the front, he realizes. People are the sum of their stories, of everything behind them, and there's no telling who someone will become without knowing where they've been. It's a gorgeous idea, and it connects directly to the series' obsession with stories, with how the past and the narrative of a life give it meaning. Dokja isn't just walking out of the underworld. He's learning that you can't save someone without knowing their whole story, everything that came before. And then he finds her. In the dark, a light. A soul. Yuzong. But not quite the Yuzong we knew. The chapter reveals this is Yuzong of the 41st round, a version shaped by memories and time, her soul carrying the weight of a life lived across who knows how many years. Time flows differently in this realm, where different worlds connect, and many years might have already passed for Yuzong. The little girl Dokja saved and the soul he now reaches for are separated by an ocean of experience, and the encounter is heavy with that strangeness, a man reaching for someone who has become, in some sense, a stranger. The reunion is achingly tender and sad. Yuzong's soul reaches out, uncertain, calling him Mr., the name the child used. And the chapter fills the moment with the ache of connection across impossible distance. She tells him something that captures the whole tragedy of her existence, that he doesn't know anything about her, but that being with him makes her feel understood. It's the loneliest, most human thing, a soul who has been alone so long that mere understanding feels like salvation. She was affected by the memories of the young Yuzong, carrying pieces of the child within the older soul, all of it tangled together in the strange arithmetic of the underworld. And then she says the words that break your heart and define the chapter. Save me. A soul reaching out of the dark, asking the one person who ever chose her to choose her again. And Dokja, without hesitation, gives the answer that defines him. I will. 2 words, the same promise he's kept chasing across gods and myths and the land of the dead, spoken again to the soul he came all this way to find. Save me. I will. It's the entire arc distilled into a single exchange. The chapter is honest about the difficulty. Dokja can only bring her along temporarily, using his own powers, and there isn't much time. He has to hurry if he wants to save her. And there's a devastating uncertainty threaded through it, the question of how much of her story will be left in her when he finally finds her again, how much the years and the underworld will have worn away. The Yuzong he's trying to save may not be entirely the same person, and the chapter sits with that melancholy, the sense that saving someone from death might mean saving a stranger who used to be someone you loved. There's a beautiful parallel to Yu Jonghyuk woven through it. Dokja wonders whether this is how Jonghyuk felt, the regressor who must continually travel back to the past because that's the only way he can move forward. The whole chapter is about that paradox, that moving ahead requires reaching back, that the future is built from the past, that you can't save a person's future without honoring their history. Dokja, walking out of the underworld with a soul reaching toward him, finally understands the regressor's endless burden from the inside. And the chapter formalizes the next stage with a hidden scenario, serpent hunting, the labor Persephone assigned made concrete. Difficulty S-, with a clear condition to hunt down the target in the area where the sixth main scenario is held, a time limit tied to the end of that scenario, a reward of coins and the trust of the Queen of the Darkest Spring, and a harsh penalty for failure, being banned from the underworld forever. The mythological bargain and the desperate rescue are now bound together, the serpent hunt and the soul retrieval part of the same quest. What makes chapter 118 so powerful is how it fuses myth, philosophy, and raw emotion. The Orpheus framing gives it mythological weight. The meditation on looking back, on people being the sum of their stories, gives it philosophical depth. And the reunion with Yuzong's soul, her plea to be saved and Dokja's simple promise, gives it a beating heart. It's the moment the entire underworld journey pays off, not with a battle but with a soul reaching out of the dark and a man promising, again, to bring her home. By the end of chapter 118, Dokja has found what he came for, a soul to save, a promise to keep, a labor to complete. Yuzong reached out of the darkness and asked to be saved, and Dokja answered the only way he knows how. The path forward runs through a serpent hunt in the sixth scenario, through more danger and more myth, but the goal is finally in his hands, or nearly so, a flickering soul that trusts him, that feels understood by him, that asked him to save her. He looked back, as the message told him he must, and found the story he came to rescue. And now, carrying that story out of the land of the dead, Kim Dokja turns toward the front, toward the living world and the hunt to come, determined to keep the promise that a girl in the dark just asked him, once more, to keep. Chapter 119 brings Kim Dokja back from the dead, launches the sixth scenario, and unveils an entirely new political landscape, a Korea carved up among self-styled kings all scrambling for a throne. It's a chapter of return, reunion, and world-building, and it sets the stage for a very different kind of conflict. It opens with Dokja's return from the underworld, and the first thing that matters is that he succeeded. He made it back to the world of the living, carrying with him the temporary presence of Yuzong's soul and the rewards of his hidden scenario. The system confirms it, the trust of the Queen of the Darkest Spring earned, coins gained, the impossible journey survived. His companions greet him with relief, Han Soo-young and the others, and there's warmth in the reunion, the sense of a man who walked into death and clawed his way back out, again. But there's no time to rest, because the serpent hunting scenario is now active, the labor Persephone assigned bound to the coming events. Dokja knows his target waits in the area where the sixth main scenario will unfold, and he'll be notified when it approaches. His personal quest, retrieving Yuzong and completing the serpent hunt for the goddess, is now woven directly into the main story about to begin. And then the sixth scenario arrives, and with it, a whole new world. The survivors are called to gather, and the chapter pulls back to reveal something the story hasn't shown before, the sheer scale of what's happening across Korea. There are still so many people left in Seoul, crowds of survivors, whole populations that made it through the earlier scenarios. And they've organized, not into one group, but into factions, territories, competing powers. The apocalypse has reshaped the country into a patchwork of domains, each with its own ruler. The chapter introduces these rulers, the kings, and it's a fascinating gallery. There's talk of the King of Beauty, the Maitreya King Sangyang-cha. The King of Wanderers. Various figures who have carved out power in the ruined world, each with their own following, their own constellation backing, their own claim to authority. The abandoned world has become a land of kings, and the sixth scenario, it emerges, is fundamentally about which of them will rule. One of the most memorable introductions is Il-do-jan, the neutral king, and he's a wonderful comic creation. His nickname is the expert fence-sitter, which makes him sound like a willy-nilly nobody, but it's actually a title tied to a historical king famous for his neutral diplomacy, a master of playing all sides and committing to none. He latches onto Dokja with theatrical friendliness, impressed by his exploits, and provides a guide into the strange politics of this new world. His constellation, the one who calls for neutral diplomacy, adds to the running theme of historical Korean figures backing these modern kings, layering the country's past onto its apocalyptic present. The chapter builds out the structure of the sixth scenario with real intelligence. It's revealed that only a select few can participate in the coming scenario, that there are limits on how many people each faction can send, and that this restriction is exactly what the kings are fighting over. Because participating early means the chance to control the scenario, to shape its outcome, to claim its rewards. The kings understand the importance of getting a head start, and so they've gathered to negotiate, or fight, over who gets to send how many of their people in. There's a sharp piece of social observation woven through it, the chapter dividing the survivors into three groups. The first group are those who tactically back out of the situation, who don't belong to any faction and are relieved to sit out the danger. The second group are those who've grown somewhat used to the scenarios, who watch and prepare and survive. And the third group, the most cynical, are those who exploit others for their own survival, the predators who feed on the weak. It's a clear-eyed portrait of how people organize under catastrophe, and it sets up the moral landscape of the arc. The chapter also introduces threats from beyond Korea, glimpses of foreign incarnations, a famous Japanese figure named Izumi, the sense that the sixth scenario is a larger, more international competition than anything before. The stakes are expanding, nation against nation, king against king, all fighting for supremacy in a world that's been abandoned by its old order and is up for grabs. And the central image the chapter builds toward is striking, the idea of a world without a king. The old structures are gone. The government, the institutions, the familiar hierarchies, all swept away by the apocalypse. Into that vacuum, these self-appointed kings have risen, each claiming the right to rule. The sixth scenario, it becomes clear, is the arena where that claim will be decided, a brutal competition to determine who sits on the throne of a broken world. What makes chapter 119 so effective is how it resets the board. The underworld arc was intimate and mythological, a personal quest through the land of the dead. This chapter pivots to something political and epic, a whole nation of survivors organized into competing kingdoms, a scenario about power and rule rather than raw survival. It's the story widening its scope again, showing that the apocalypse isn't just about monsters, but about how humans rebuild power in the ruins, and how ugly that rebuilding can be. And it keeps Dokja's personal stakes alive within the larger canvas. He's not just entering a political scenario. He's hunting a serpent for a goddess, carrying a soul he promised to save, working his own agenda beneath the clash of kings. The serpent hunting quest ties his underworld journey to the sixth scenario, so that every step through this new political landscape is also a step toward keeping his promise to Yuzong. The epic and the personal move together. The chapter is rich with the sense of a new game beginning, one with different rules. This isn't a fight against a catastrophe or a Dakibi's cruel scenario. It's a contest among humans, kings and factions and constellations, all maneuvering for control. And Dokja, the reader who knows how stories work, is stepping into a story about power and ambition, armed with his knowledge, his companions, and a secret quest that has nothing to do with thrones. By the end of chapter 119, the sixth scenario has begun, and it's unlike anything before. Korea has become a land of kings, all gathering to fight over a throne in a world that lost its ruler. Dokja is back from the dead, Yuzong's soul in his care, a serpent to hunt, a promise to keep. And the strange, theatrical neutral king has pulled him into the heart of the coming political storm. The reader who bends fate with knowledge has walked out of the underworld and straight into a war of crowns, and as the kings gather and the sixth scenario looms, you can feel the story shifting into a new and dangerous gear, one where the monsters wear human faces and the prize is nothing less than the rule of an abandoned world. It's worth appreciating how sharply this chapter satirizes the way power reconstitutes itself after a collapse, because that satire is the chapter's secret engine. The apocalypse was supposed to be a great leveler, stripping away titles and hierarchies and leaving only survival. And yet, given the smallest opportunity, the survivors have rebuilt the exact structures that failed them, crowning kings, drawing borders, establishing pecking orders, all the old machinery of domination dressed up in new apocalyptic costume. The chapter observes this with a cold, knowing eye, and it invites you to notice how quickly the language of nobility and heritage gets deployed to justify naked self-interest. These aren't rulers chosen for wisdom or strength of character. They're the loudest, the greediest, the quickest to grab. And the historical constellations backing them, the ancient Korean kings and politicians, only deepen the irony, layering the failures of the past onto the failures of the present, as if the country's history of power struggles is simply repeating itself in miniature amid the ruins. Against that backdrop, Dokja's difference becomes the quiet point of the whole chapter. He walks through this gallery of would-be kings entirely uninterested in the crown they're all killing for, and that disinterest is its own kind of power. Because a man who wants nothing the room is offering cannot be controlled by the room. The kings can bribe, threaten, or flatter each other, trading in ambition and fear, but none of those levers work on someone whose real goal is invisible to them, the hunt for a serpent, the rescue of a soul, a promise made in the land of the dead. Dokja moves through their politics like a ghost, present but untouchable, precisely because he refuses to play their game. And that's the deeper thesis the chapter is building toward, that in a world scrambling for thrones, the most dangerous person is the one who doesn't want one, the reader who sees the whole board clearly because he has no stake in winning it. While the kings fight over the ruins of the old world, Dokja is already living by the rules of a different story entirely, one about loyalty and stubborn love rather than power, and that story is the only one in this chapter that feels worth telling. Chapter 120 drops Kim Dokja into a room full of self-proclaimed kings squabbling over a throne, and it's a sharp, funny, and pointed chapter about power, ego, and the ugly politics of rebuilding a world. It's the meeting of kings, and it caps off this stretch of the story by turning the sixth scenario into a battlefield of crowns and cynicism. It opens with the gathering itself, a summit of the various rulers who have carved up the abandoned world. The chapter frames it perfectly, a meeting of kings held to fight over the ruling throne. These are the powers of the new Korea, each with a grandiose title and a constellation backing their claim, all crammed into one room to decide who leads. And the tone is deliciously satirical, because for all their royal pretensions, these kings behave like the pettiest of politicians. The gallery of rulers is vivid and pointed. There's the king of beauty, the Maitreya king. There's the king of the wanderers, a masked, watchful figure. And most memorably, there's Yahello, the president of Yahello, a politician who cleared the very first scenario and now styles himself a king. He's a brilliant piece of satire, a slick, self-important figure who talks endlessly about democracy and civilization while maneuvering entirely for his own advantage. His constellation is a corrupt Joseon-era politician, a perfect match, and the chapter has enormous fun skewering him, this smooth-talking opportunist rapping naked ambition in the language of high principle. The central conflict of the meeting is deceptively mundane, and that's the point. Because the sixth scenario has a limit on how many participants each faction can send in, the number allocated for the Soul Dome capped, with additional slots tied to how well each incarnation progresses. And so the kings are here to fight over exactly that, who gets to send how many of their people into the scenario. It sounds bureaucratic, but the stakes are enormous, because the kings understand that the more of their own they get in early, the better their chance to control the scenario and claim the throne. Getting a head start is everything. The chapter mines this for both comedy and cutting social commentary. The kings bicker endlessly, some arguing they should just do it democratically, send whoever's willing, while others insist on strength or heritage or their own superiority. Yahello pushes for democratic-sounding solutions that conveniently favor him. Others invoke ancient kingdoms and cultural pride, one claiming the right to lead as a descendant of Silla, another insisting beach should lead, the whole room descending into a squabble over historical prestige that has nothing to do with actual capability. It's a savage little portrait of how power vacuums get filled, not by the worthy, but by the loudest and most self-serving. Dokja watches all of it with his reader's eye, seeing through the posturing to the real dynamics underneath. He's here on his own agenda, the serpent hunt, the promise to Yuzong, but he can't help analyzing the room, reading these kings the way he reads everything, cataloging their weaknesses and ambitions. The chapter uses his perspective to cut through the pomp, exposing the pettiness and self-interest driving the whole charade. These aren't noble rulers deciding the fate of a nation. They're scared, greedy people grabbing for power in the ruins. There's a wonderful thread with the King of the Wanderers, a masked figure who watches Dokja intently, seeming to test him, to gauge whether he can read the situation, whether he's more than he appears. It adds an undercurrent of intrigue to the political theater, the sense that not everyone in the room is a fool, that some of these players are watching and calculating just as sharply as Dokja himself. The chapter is rich with the theme of a world without a king and everyone's scramble to become one. It observes, pointedly, that these people believe the more of their own they can get in early, the better their chance to control the scenario, and it frames the whole meeting as a fight over the ruling throne of an abandoned world. It's a meditation on how humans respond to the collapse of order, not with cooperation, but with a frantic, cynical grab for whatever power remains. The apocalypse stripped away the old hierarchy, and into that void rushed a crowd of would-be kings, each convinced they should rule. And running beneath all the political satire is Dokja's real purpose, the serpent he must hunt for Persephone, the soul he carries, the promise driving everything. The kings argue over thrones, but Dokja is playing a different game entirely, working toward a goal none of them can see. The serpent hunting scenario looms, its target somewhere in the arena the kings are fighting to enter, and Dokja's quest is quietly threaded through the whole meeting, a secret mission beneath the clash of crowns. The chapter builds toward disruption, because a room full of ambitious kings arguing over power is a powder keg. Tensions rise, tempers flare, and the fragile pretense of civilized negotiation strains toward breaking. There's a growing sense that this meeting can't hold, that the competing egos and hidden agendas are going to collide. And the chapter delivers a jolt at its end, a sudden explosion, a violent interruption that shatters the political theater. Kaboom! The careful maneuvering gives way to chaos, and the sixth scenario lurches into a more dangerous phase. What makes chapter 120 so effective is how it uses the meeting of kings to say something real about power and human nature. It could have been a straightforward setup for the next arc. Instead, it's a pointed satire, exposing how the collapse of order breeds not heroes but opportunists, how the language of democracy and heritage gets weaponized by the self-interested, how a throne left empty attracts exactly the wrong people. The kings are ridiculous, and that ridiculousness is the point, a reminder that the real monsters in the apocalypse aren't always the ones with claws. And it sets Dokja apart from all of them. He's in the room, but he's not playing their game. He doesn't want a throne. He wants to keep a promise, to hunt a serpent, to save a soul. While the kings grasp for power, Dokja pursues something the whole room would find incomprehensible, a quest driven by loyalty and stubborn compassion rather than ambition. That contrast is the quiet heart of the chapter, the reader who could probably out-scheme every king present, uninterested in the crown they're all killing for. By the end of chapter 120, the sixth scenario has fully taken shape as a war of kings, a cynical scramble for the throne of an abandoned world, and the fragile peace of their meeting has just been blown apart. Dokja stands in the middle of it, his own quest ticking forward beneath the chaos, the serpent hunt and the soul he carries pulling him toward goals none of these kings can grasp. The abandoned world has become a battlefield of crowns, and the reader who refuses to accept endings is walking through it toward a promise, while all around him, would-be kings tear at each other for the right to rule the ruins. The throne is empty. The kings are circling. And Kim Dokja, as always, is playing a deeper game than any of them can see.